Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here in person and in the chat for this press conference with Ms. Catherine Namakula, who's the chairperson of the UN Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent. She will do some opening remarks based on her report that she presented to the Third Committee of the General Assembly, and then she'll take your questions. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, everybody, for your interest in the work of the working group. The working group and all my colleagues have the pleasure to have relayed their annual report to the Third Committee of the General Assembly yesterday. And, of course, we thank all member states and civil society that were present and they made contributions to this very important session. And of course, it is important to emphasize that the working group has made repeated calls to member states to abandon all attempts to conceal racism and translate their commitments under international human rights law into accountability and redress, and of course, tangible improvements in the lives of men, women, and children of African descent. We particularly called for the development of a racial justice index reflecting the lived realities of people of African descent to measure the performance of states in this regard. And of course, we as a working group are particularly concerned about the treatment of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers of African descent. And we call upon states to guarantee their access to safety, development, and justice. We commend the steps taken by some states, of course, the international, national, and regional level to ensure the advancement of the discourse on racial justice, but also decry the situation of children of African descent as not being treated as children at all, and of course call for the use of education to be reversed in its use as an instrument of racial discrimination to now becoming an instrument against racial discrimination. We are calling upon all countries to re-educate themselves about African history, where the dignity of people of African descent has been, of course, brutalized, to be restored in that regard. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With that, we'll open to questions. Do we have any questions in the room? Go ahead. Can you please just introduce yourselves to the chairperson, please, before you ask your questions? Thank you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Cecilia from the News Agency of Nigeria. Please, I would like to find out from you about if there are sanctions for countries who do not respect the dignity of people from African descent. Are there recommendations that has to do with sanctions in your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia, for your question. We've made several recommendations, of course, among to states to improve and honor their commitments under international human rights law, to respect the dignity of people of African descent. And of course, as a body that reports the Human Rights Council, all we can do is recommend, and then states can include this in their dialogue. And of course, at this point, we are saying we need to come to a level of accountability and redress, whereby we would want to see consequences for states that do not honor their commitments. And of course, this has to be looked at in the broader discourse of human rights law as the softer kind of law, whereby it's more about the commitment of states themselves that advances the discourse. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you. You had a question, sir.
Good morning. Gary Ronaldo with the Diplomatic Times. Just want to have a question. What sort of, have you spoken with, say, some of the European organizations to address this type of discrimination against Africans? Because I know there was a UN report that they cited, in particular, Switzerland was, had a problem with systemic racism. So what could you do, to talk to countries from Europe to address the situation? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think our mandate as a working group is to work on the human rights violations or situation of people of African descent and Africans in the diaspora, and this includes Europe. And we have had extensive visits to European countries. As you have seen, we've been to the Netherlands, we have been to Switzerland, and in the past year also Portugal. So we have documented our recommendations as well. And of course, I don't know what you mean by organizations, but of course, civil society has been very much interested. We have engaged the European Union at a regional level, and of course we can see some developments at the regional level within the EU itself, with of course the strategy on anti-racism, which is currently ongoing. But there are also concerns about the action taken in response, of course, following these particular plans of action. Yes, we can see the documentary work, we can see the ideological commitment, but we want to see action accompany this. So it's a task for all of us and all stakeholders to follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have any additional questions? I don't see any questions in the chat. So, Madam Chair, thank you so much for your briefing. Thank you all.